Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the quiet town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, life ebbed and flowed like the season. The picturesque streets were lined with white picket fences, and children's laughter filled the air. But beneath this idyllic surface lay secrets that would soon be forced into the light. The morning of July 14th began like any other. The sun glimmered through the leaves, casting a kaleidoscope of shadows on the sidewalk. Residents went about their routines, unaware that this day would mark the start of a chilling saga that would ripple through their community. At around 8 o'clock that morning, the serene atmosphere was shattered when Carol Jensen, a beloved local teacher, failed to arrive at Maplewood Elementary School. Her absence was soon noticed by colleagues and worried friends. Carol was known for her punctuality and dedication. She never missed a day of work unless illness struck. As the hours crept by, fellow teachers exchanged anxious glances and made phone calls, seeking answers that would only lead them deeper into uncertainty. 12:30, a pair of concerned friends decided to pay a visit to Carol's home. As they turned onto her street, the vibrant hues of summer began to fade. A sense of foreboding settled between them. They exchanged worried whispers, glancing at the neighbor's yard where an unusual quiet lay. Flowers bloomed, but they stood as mere spectators to the absence haunting that morning. When they reached Carol's front door, the feeling intensified. A light knock brought no response. With exchanged nods, they stepped inside, their hearts racing as they crossed the threshold into an unsettling silence. What they would discover would change everything. The victim, Carol Jensen, was a beacon in Maplewood, a dedicated teacher with a passion for igniting young minds. Her students flourished under her guidance, and the community came to admire her, not just as an educator, but as a steadfast friend. Known for her buoyant smile and warm disposition, she spent weekends volunteering at local shelters and organizing community events. But beneath that friendly exterior lay the complexities of an ordinary life touched by shadow. As her friends stepped into her home, they were greeted by an unsettling scene. The air felt stagnant, and the normally vibrant household appeared frozen in time. Carol's favorite books lay scattered across the coffee table, open to pages she must have been reading, and her left-behind cup of lukewarm tea seemed to echo the sudden halt in her life. Their hearts raced, sending shivers down their spines as they called her name, their voices trembling with trepidation. It was when they reached the bedroom that dread morphed into horror. The door creaked open, revealing a room that had been disrupted in an uncanny manner. Clothes were tossed carelessly across the floor, the bed unmade as if she had been caught in a turbulent moment. That was when they saw her. On the floor, curled in a small, frightened ball, was Carol. A sheer horror enveloped her friends as they realized the truth. She lay lifeless, her once expressive eyes now dull and blank, framed by strands of hair that seemed to cling to her face, a silent testimony to the violence that had transpired. In an instant, joy and laughter were replaced by disbelief and heartbreak. They fumbled for their phones, urgency clawing at their throats as they dialed 911. The vibrant life of Carol Jensen had been snuffed out, leaving behind an echo of despair that rippled through Maplewood, that would resonate far beyond those four walls. As sirens wailed in the distance, the mystery of her demise loomed heavily. heralding the beginning of an investigation that would uncover more than anyone ever expected. The crime scene. The sharp wail of sirens filled the air as the first responders arrived, their presence parachuting a wave of harsh reality into the tranquility of Maplewood. Paramedics rushed past the distressed friends, their expressions shifting from concern to grim professionalism. And soon the echo of footsteps reverberated through the small home. Detective Sarah Monroe stepped through the doorway, her keen eyes quickly taking in the chaos. She had navigated through innumerable crime scenes in her career, but the brutality of this one struck her deep. Carol Jensen was loved. Her loss would resonate through the community, an echo of sorrow that she feared would not fade easily. "Secure the area," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. Officers positioned themselves at the door, making sure no one could enter or leave unaccounted for. It was a canvas of heartbreak, painted with shades of fear and loss. Sarah's gaze shifted, absorbing every detail of overturned furniture, the tattered bedspread, and the framed photographs that now bore witness to a fleeting life. Forensics arrived shortly after, armed with gloves and tools, ready to collect evidence. They carefully sifted through the room, their movements deliberate and practiced. A broken lamp cast an eerie light in one corner, glass shards scattered across the floor, telling a story of struggle. An open window allowed a breeze to swirl in, brushing against the curtains that flapped lightly, as if trying to disperse the weight of what had occurred. As the medical examiner began to investigate, Sarah stood resolutely in the doorway. Every scene whispered secrets. She needed to listen closely. Random act. Whoever had taken Carol's life had known her intimately. Outside, the small crowd that had gathered included neighbors and concerned friends, each face a reminder of the fragility of life. Whispers ignited among them, a mixture of disbelief and speculation. As Officer Reynolds began to cordon off the area with yellow tape, Sarah felt a storm gathering. Hidden truths waited to unravel in a town that had always seemed so safe. The shadows now began to lengthen, and the hunt for justice was just beginning. They heard the investigation. In the days following Carol Jensen's tragic death, the atmosphere in Maplewood shifted like an erratic heartbeat. News spread like wildfire, and the once close-knit community braced itself for the aftermath of violence that had intruded upon their lives. Detective Sarah Monroe and her partner, Officer Reynolds, were tasked with untangling the web of Carol's life, searching for a thread that would lead to answers. They began with the basics: interviews with friends, family, and colleagues. The scene at the elementary school was somber. Teachers and students whispered Carol's name, their sorrow palpable. Sarah sat with the principal, Ms. Gordon, who could barely hold back tears as she described Carol's passion for teaching. "She had a way of making every child feel special," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is unimaginable." As more details emerged, Sarah noted that Carol had experienced subtle changes in her demeanor over the past few months. Colleagues mentioned her preoccupation, her distracted smile, silence of something lurking beneath the surface. Her friends spoke of vague worries regarding a possible stalker, late-night phone calls that would leave her wrapped. Any signs of trouble had been dismissed as paranoia. Now those vague worries weighed heavily in the air. The duo decided to visit Carol's home once more, retracing their steps with renewed purpose. Sarah meticulously examined the crime scene, looking at each detail afresh. A photograph caught her eye Carol with a group of friends at a summer festival. Everyone appeared joyful, but one face stood out. A man, lingering in the background, cast a shadow for Sarah that seemed out of place. Reynolds, flipping through Carol's phone records, discovered repeated calls from an unregistered number in the months leading to the incident. "This could be worth a closer look," he remarked, tension threading through his voice. Days slid into nights as they pursued leads, piecing together the fragments of Carol's life like a jigsaw puzzle. The investigation was nascent, yet it felt as though they were chasing whispers of ghosts that refused to be pinned down. Each new piece of information fed the urgency within Sarah. Time was slipping away, and with it the hope of unearthing the truth that lay hidden in Maplewood's shadows. The dead ends. As weeks passed, the frenzied pace of the investigation began to ebb into a melancholic rhythm. Each day brought with it a familiar sense of frustration. Leads turned cold like winter's breath, and the grasp on the truth slipped further away. Detective Sarah Monroe sank deeper into the case, but all she dug up were half-truths and contradictions that whispered of darkness. Investigators followed the trail of those cryptic phone records to a nondescript number, tracing it to a local man named Mike Delaney. The team was eager for answers, but their hopes deflated quickly. Mike, in his early 30s, stood nervously in an interrogation room, his eyes darting around as if seeking an exit. "I admired her from a distance, okay? I never meant any harm," he stammered, his voice catching as he spoke of Carol with a peculiar mix of infatuation and regret. "Imagining a romance and stalking are two very different things," Sarah reminded him, her voice steady but firm, trying to penetrate the fog of his confusion. Yet when they checked his alibi, it was verifiable. He'd been at work during the time of the murder. The detective left the interrogation room disheartened, the glimmer of a promising lead snuffed out. Conversations with other acquaintances yielded similar dead ends. Friends recalled Carol talking about a troublesome ex-boyfriend, Tom, whose explosive temper had haunted their relationship last year. Yet, when tracked down, Tom claimed to have moved out of state after their split, confirming his whereabouts the day of the murder through his current location at a wedding across the country. Each avenue Sarah pursued seemed to unfurl into a maze, winding into paths with no exit. Even the neighbors whom detectives had canvassed recalled little to contributing odd car parked nearby once or twice, a distant figure seen walking late at night. With elusive witness testimonies, every dig into Carol's life unearthed layers of mystery that only grew thicker. The pressure against Sarah's chest grew heavier. The weight of unanswered questions loomed over her, and the community began to feel the strain as well. With no clear suspect in sight and uncertainty settling in, a sense of dread that had blanketed Maplewood turned palpable. And just as she felt ready to retreat into her thoughts for the night, a message flashed across her email, an anonymous tip that threatened to raise the stakes to new heights, pulling her into the dark heart of the case once again. A break in the case. The glint of the screen illuminated Detective Sarah Monroe's face as she read the email in disbelief. An anonymous tipster claimed to have information regarding Carol Jensen's death. The words buried truth struck a chord deep within her. The promise of a break in the case shimmered before her, like a distant lighthouse amid stormy seas. Determined, Sarah hurriedly forwarded the email to Officer Reynolds and set up a meeting with the informant at a discreet diner on the outskirts of town. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the scent of brewed coffee mixed with the sweetness of pastries filled the air. Every tick of the clock heightened her anticipation and anxiety. When a figure finally slipped into the booth across from her, Sarah found herself face to face with a nervous young woman named Lisa, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her hoodie. "I didn't know who else to tell," Lisa whispered, lowering her voice as if afraid the shadows might eavesdrop. "I wasn't sure anyone would believe me." Taking a deep breath, Sarah leaned in, sensing the weight of the girl's confession. "What do you know?" Lisa glanced around before continuing. "I was at the festival last summer. Carol was there too. I saw her with a guy, someone I hadn't recognized. They were arguing a little, but I thought it was just a couple's quarrel." Her eyes darted towards the door. "But later, I overheard him talking about her at a bar. He said something about wanting to make her pay." Holding the tension in her chest, Sarah pressed for more details. The man Lisa described sounded familiar, a face from the photograph she had seen during the investigation. "What did he look like?" "Tall, dark hair, muscular." Lisa paused, biting her lip. "He wore a tattoo on his forearm. I don't remember what it was, but it looked like a snake." An unmistakable chill skittered down Sarah's spine. The tattoo echoed a description from others who'd frequented the same bar. "It was a small but critical lid. Can you help identify him?" With a nod, Lisa agreed to show the sketches of local patrons to pinpoint the man. But Sarah felt the urgency spiral into desperation. The fog began to clear, revealing a potential suspect who had remained hidden in the smog of anonymity. As Sarah and Reynolds regrouped later that evening, the pieces began to align like stars in the night sky. The name Lisa mentioned suddenly became the focal point of their search, igniting hope amidst the lengthening shadow. Maplewood was awakening not just to sorrow, but to the possibility of justice, something neither the community nor Sarah Monroe would take lightly. The suspect. The night cloaked Sarah Monroe in equal parts determination and anxiety as she sifted through the files of potential suspects. Familiar to the bar frequented by Carol's anonymous admirer, she felt the heat of the diner's fluorescent lights behind her as she pored over photographs alongside Officer Reynolds. The murky past and tangled connections of her small town began to pull into focus. Among the faces she examined, one stood out, a man named Jordan Blake. With his dark hair and well-defined physique, he matched Lisa's description. The tattoo, a coiling serpent, wound its way around his forearm, a symbol of power that more than one witness had mentioned. Jordan had never been listed as a suspect, but as Sarah dug deeper, she found that he had a checkered past, peppered with bouts of violence. Jordan was involved in a bar fight last year. "He tends to have a quick temper when he drinks," Reynolds noted, flipping through the incident reports. "There are multiple complaints on record from different women claiming he couldn't take no for an answer. And he's still in town." Sarah felt a surge of clarity blend with dread. They needed to confront him, but she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that they had to proceed carefully. Maplewood might have been a haven until now, but the shadows cast by Jordan's past had started to stain its reputation. With renewed purpose, they set a plan into motion. At the crack of dawn, they visited a local gym where Jordan worked out. As they approached, they spotted him, his imposing figure already drenched in sweat, lifting weights as if trying to exorcise his demons. When he caught sight of the detectives, he dropped the weights with a loud clang and stared, a flicker of wariness flashing in his dark eyes. "Detective Monroe, Officer Reynolds," Jordan said, attempting nonchalance as his grip tightened around the barbel's cold steel. "What brings you here? Mind if we ask you a few questions?" Sarah replied, her eyes unwavering. She took a step closer, reading the tension in his body, while Reynolds fanned out a little behind her, ready to strike if necessary. As they engaged him in conversation, probing into his whereabouts on the night of Carol's death, Jordan feigned ignorance, deflecting with practiced ease. But cracks began to surface in his demeanor when Sarah brought up a specific detail: a witness who had seen him arguing with a woman at last summer's festival. A frown creased his forehead, the mask of bravado slipping. "I don't know what you're talking about. Look, I was just having a few drinks." "I don't start trouble," he insisted, but the underlying edge in his tone betrayed him. Their line of questioning pushed him closer to the boundary of panic, raising flags of guilt that danced in plain sight. The more he evaded the truth, the more Sarah could sense the desperation beneath his bravado. She knew she had him on the ropes, and as the confrontation unfolded, the walls of Jordan Blake's carefully created persona began to crumble, revealing the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. The investigation narrowed, but the fight for justice was far from over. The trial. The courtroom buzzed with energy, a palpable tension hanging in the air as members of the community gathered to witness justice unfold. As Detective Sarah Monroe entered, she felt the weight of their collective gaze resting upon her. The trial of Jordan Blake had become a focal point, drawing in friends and family of Carol Jensen, all seeking closure in the wake of tragedy. The judge's gavel echoed as proceedings began, and Sarah felt a swirl of emotions, anticipation mixed with anxiety. The prosecutor laid out a compelling case, methodically presenting the evidence linking Jordan to Carol's murder. Testimonies from witnesses painted a portrait of a man who had crossed boundaries too many times, and the atmosphere thickened as the jury listened intently. Each witness brought a piece of the puzzle into view. Lisa, the anonymous tipster, spoke with a shuddering voice about the encounter at the festival where she had seen Carol and Jordan arguing. The prosecutor's questions illuminated Jordan's propensity for violence, contrasting the laughter at summer festivals with the shadows that crept behind their smile. As the defense took its turn, they focused on tearing apart the timeline, aiming to create doubt in the jury's mind. They painted a picture of confusion, insisting that the evidence was circumstantial and that Jordan had never directly threatened Carol. Each doubt they sowed felt like daggers to Sarah's heart, unraveling the threads of truth she had fought so hard to weave together. Closing arguments brought the atmosphere to a boiling point. The prosecutor passionately summarized the case, his voice rising as he urged the jury to see beyond the facade, to recognize the darkness in Jordan Blake. The defense countered, presenting an alternative narrative that claimed Jordan's innocence, yet the air had shifted in favor of the prosecution. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom held its breath. Hours stretched into an agonizing wait, each tick of the clock echoing like a heartbeat. Sarah's mind replayed the evidence she had amassed. The mountains of emotion surrounding Carol's life snuffed out far too soon. Finally, the jury returned, faces solemn as they took their seats. Gasps filled the room as the foreman announced, we find the defendant, Jordan Blake, guilty of second-degree murder. Relief and anguish intermingled as tears streamed down the faces of Carol's friends and family. Sarah felt a swell of emotion rise within her, though justice had been served. The heavy shadows of loss loomed over Maplewood, a reminder that sometimes justice could not restore what had been taken. As she stepped outside the courthouse into the sunlight, Sarah breathed deeply, determined to honor Carol's memory by ensuring that the community would heal from this tragedy. But in the depths of her heart, she knew that justice was merely a chapter closed, not the end of a story, for the scars of the past would remain woven into the fabric of Maplewood for years to come. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, a somber quiet settled over Maplewood. The verdict, while a semblance of justice, could not quiet the echoes of sorrow resonating throughout the community. Sarah Monroe found herself walking familiar streets, each step weighed down with memories of Carol Jensen, her laughter, her warmth, and the vibrant spirit that once lit up the town. Local businesses showed the impact too. The bakery where Carol often stopped for her morning coffee now displayed a wreath in her honor, a reminder of the life that had brightened their mornings. Friends gathered at the park to share stories, lighting candles in her memory. But the festivities of summers past felt like a ghostly echo against the backdrop of their loss. As Sarah resumed her duties, she grappled with an unshakable feeling of ambivalence. Though Jordan Blake was behind bars, she often questioned whether anything could truly heal the fracture in the community. The phone calls and messages from residents surged, often conveying lingering, fierce questions of safety. Murmurs about crime that seemed to hang heavily in the air. At a town hall meeting, residents congregated, their voices rising in a mix of concern and demands for solutions. Sarah stood at the front, her heart racing as she prepared to address the crowd. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, knowing that her words would offer little consolation to those grappling with loss. I know that many of you feel unsettled, perhaps even unsafe in a place that was once home, but we will not let this darkness define us, she declared, her resolve crystallizing with each word. As a community, we can come together to rebuild trust, to support one another, and to ensure that nothing like this happens again. As she spoke, she could see nods of understanding, faces softened with the warmth of solidarity. The discussions that followed began to bubble with ideas: community watch programs, outreach efforts to support mental health, and initiatives focused on educating residents about recognizing the signs of domestic violence. Slowly, the tumult of fear began transforming into a sense of purpose. Sarah realized that while justice had tackled Jordan's guilt, it would take a collective effort to heal wounds that ran deeper than crime. The town of Maplewood would not be the same, but neither would it succumb to despair. The spirit of Carol Jensen would continue to motivate them all. In her quiet moments, Sarah would still hear Carol's laughter echo beneath the surface of her thoughts, urging her forward in the pursuit of change. On days when the heaviness became too much, she would visit the park dedicated in Carol's honor, where vibrant blooms nodded in the breeze. Life would pulse forward despite the shadows. It always did, and with each step, Sarah vowed to honor Carol's memory by ensuring that light continued to bloom amidst the darkness. The journey to heal Maplewood had just begun, forging a path not only to restore safety, but to foster understanding and hope for those left behind. Reflection. As the seasons turned, the vibrant hues of autumn replaced the faded greens of summer in Maplewood. The leaves performed their final dance, cascading down like memories that drifted lazily through Sarah Monroe's mind. With the passing of time came moments of reflection, both bittersweet and enlightening. Sarah often found herself drawn to Carol Jensen's memorial in the park, gazing at the engraved stone that bore Carol's name, surrounded by a garden that dared to bloom amid sorrow. It was there, amidst whispers of the wind and rustling leaves, that she often pondered the fragile nature of life. With each visit, she imagined Carol's laughter, a sound that echoed in a place where joy had once reigned. In the quiet solitude of those moments, Sarah cultivated a newfound understanding of her purpose in art, just as a detective, but as a part of this community that felt the ripple effects of tragedy. She recognized that healing did not solely reside in catching perpetrators. It also lay in fostering connection, in nurturing trust, and in amplifying the voices silenced by fear. The pain of Carol's loss would always remain as an indelible scar on the town's heart, but through shared grief emerged conversations that had once stayed buried. Residents began reaching out, forming bonds that transcended their pain, and initiated dialogues about mental health, prevention, and vigilance that would keep their town safer. Reflecting on all that had transpired, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Advocacy ignited a spark for real change, paving the path forward. The journey of justice began closer to home, not only in courtrooms, but also within the hearts of those willing to speak out, to support one another, and to ensure that darkness was met with unwavering resilience. And as the first snow fell gently upon the memorial, blanketing it in white, Sarah watched as the community transformed. They rose together, united against fear, love intertwining with memories, moving forward as guardians of each other's stories. In that moment, Sarah realized that while their lives would never be the same, they had the power to honor Carol's legacy through living fully, intentionally, and together.